Most of the time, these adjectives and adverbs here cause very little trouble, but sometimes they're a little bit tricky. So when we use them regularly, we just use adjectives to modify nouns, and you might say something like good game if you're congratulating somebody, right? Good game or bad game. Game is the noun, and good or bad describes it. With adverbs, we tend to modify verbs and a few other parts of speech as well. You could say something like that went badly. And in this case, badly is describing went. Went how? It went badly. Now, so far so good. That's not too difficult, I suppose. But the trouble comes in especially with linking verbs. And just to remind you of a few basic points of grammar here, a linking verb is a verb that acts a bit like an equation, like an equal sign, and it connects a subject with what's called a subject complement, which consists typically of a noun and its modifiers, or an adjective. And this noun or adjective modifies or describes, really, the subject. So you could say X equals Y, right? If we look at some sentences with these adjectives and adverbs, then you could say something like, I am good. Somebody says, how are you doing? I am good. Is that acceptable? Well, it does follow this pattern. So if you say I, there's our subject, am is our linking verb, and good is the adjective that describes I. So that's fine. Seems a bit weird maybe, but it sounds a bit casual, but it is actually acceptable. Here's another example. What if you say, you did good? Would that be acceptable? Because you hear this all the time too, right? You did good. Well, this time it's not acceptable because did is not a linking verb. And we need well. You did well. And that's the basic distinction, that with a linking verb you're allowed to use the adjective form. With the regular kind of verb you need the adverb form. Alright, let's give a couple more examples just to see how this works. Let's say you say, she performed, there we go, she performed good. Would that be acceptable? Well, no, we need well, because performed is the main verb here. It's not a linking verb, and if we say performed how, we need well. Okay, so good would be bad. Let's have a look at another one. What if you say, she felt bad? Would that be allowed? Or should it be, she felt badly? Okay, well, here's where we get into a little bit more trouble. Here's another wrench that we're going to throw into things. Felt is a linking verb. So the linking verbs are often forms of to be, or they're often forms of the different verbs that have to do with the senses, like taste and touch and so on. So felt is a linking verb. It's like an equal sign, and that's why bad is technically correct. But in a few instances, you are allowed to use badly. If you say she felt badly, then what you are actually saying is a little bit different from describing kind of, her health. It's not talking so much about that she has a stomach ache and she felt bad, that kind of bad. But if you say she felt badly, then you mean more something like she felt apologetic, like she had done something wrong. And that's where badly changes the meaning a little bit and is probably more modifying felt than she. Okay? There's one other case, one other wrench we're going to throw into this, and this has to do with well. So we said before that you can say I am good. But good here is a fairly general description. If you're talking specifically about health, then you should be using well. Okay, then you should actually be using well, because well is the word we use to describe our health. And so to sum up then, if this kind of makes sense to you, with a linking verb, we tend to use the adjective form, but there are a couple of exceptions to that exception. The one exception is with badly. If you're talking about feeling badly, then sometimes you can use badly when you're talking about those apologetic kind of situations. And if you're talking about your health specifically, then well is often more appropriate than good. But in other cases, with the linking verb, you are allowed to use the adjective. And if you keep that in mind, you'll be able to avoid some awkward grammatical problems.